Whether or not you're really supposed to do that's a different question.
This is not financial advice.
So you're thinking about moving to Portland or maybe somewhere around Portland and you're already in Portland, you're going to want to know the cost because costs are going up.
We should probably talk about that.
We're going to get into that right now.
What's up, everybody? This is Paul and Seth with the Home Team Brokers. Today we're talking about the cost of living in the Portland area. And we get people reaching out to us all the time who are thinking about moving to Portland. And so if you're in that same boat, give us a call, send us a text, email. You can even schedule a Zoom call in the description of this video. Either way, we'd love to chat with you. Today we're talking about the cost of living in the Portland, Oregon area. And there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so we're just going to start by talking about the overall cost of living. And we know a lot of people coming to this area. A lot of them are already on the West Coast, a lot of Californians coming here. Some from outside of the West Coast, but a lot of people kind of looking at the West Coast, you know, are comparing to other cities such as LA, San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland overall is significantly more expensive to live in than the rest of the country. I think it's something like 80% more expensive than a lot of the country. But when you contrast that with if you're looking at a Seattle or a San Francisco, Portland is half the cost of a Seattle or a third of the cost of a San Francisco. A lot of tech people moving here too, and Portland has kind of been, if you haven't heard this before, kind of been dubbed the Silicon Forest.
Right.
If you will,
right.
Because we do have a lot of tech companies here. So the overall general cost of living is more expensive than the rest of the country, but compared to the rest of the West Coast, it's a relative bargain, and that's what's driving a lot of people to Portland right now.
Yeah, so, you know, a little bit of a spoiler alert for probably the main point of this video. Portland is the most affordable major city on the West Coast. Cities on either coast, West Coast, East Coast, tend to be more expensive than the rest of the country for a number of reasons. And like Seth said, you know, Portland does skew a bit higher than, you know, the average cost of living of the rest of the country overall. But altogether, you know, as we go through some of these topics and categories, we'll kind of compare to a place like Seattle, a place like San Francisco, LA, where overall across the board, it's considerably more expensive.
So first thing on a list, groceries.
Groceries, gotta eat.
You do have to eat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I was at the grocery store last night actually, and I really don't pay too much attention to prices. I kind of just buy what I want. I'm not a big coupon guy, but definitely in the last year, I definitely have noticed groceries going up. According to the data, though, Portland really falls in line with the average for the rest of the country. So for a lot of people, if you're coming here, your groceries are probably not going to be more expensive, although they've definitely gone up, you know, probably due to inflation.
Yeah, I mean, it's about a one-to-one comparison, you know, for the average of the rest of the country. And there's probably a number of reasons why. We do have a lot of kind of local producers for produce, ranches, things like that. So that could definitely factor in. But you know, there's a big range as far as what's available to you. So, you know, Portland tends to be and kind of have a reputation for being a little more of a health-conscious city. So you have a lot of higher-end stores, higher-end in terms of price in particular, you know, where you can be getting those $4 avocados and, you know, your $8 boxes of cereal and all of that stuff. But there's kind of your standard grocery stores as well. And then you have some more discount grocery stores too. So there's a big range depending on, you know, your own eating habits and lifestyle. But, you know, across the board, it falls about average. You can probably find, you know, exactly what you're looking for, regardless if you have a little bit of a higher budget or you want to save a little bit on groceries.
Right, yeah. So if you got a higher budget and you're looking for specific food, we definitely have that here. You know, a big place where people are saving is farmers markets.
Totally.
Pretty much every town throughout Portland in the Portland metropolitan area. This isn't just Portland, so the surrounding towns. Pretty much every town has a farmer's market. It varies a little bit as to how often they run as far as year-round. Typically once a week, but when they start and when they end, that can vary a little bit. But people are finding savings, whether it's meat or veggies, by buying local and visiting farmers markets.
Yeah, a lot of farmers markets. It's also a great part of the country to have a personal garden too, which tends to be something, or seems to be something rather, that is becoming more and more popular. So, again, depending on your lifestyle and what you're looking for, you can probably find it here.
Yeah.
There's some higher end grocery stores, like I mentioned, like New Seasons, Whole Foods, even Trader Joe's, which really I don't think is that much more expensive than average. But there's a local chain called Zupan's. I believe Market of Choice is one locally that has a lot of more of kind of the organic, locally sourced type offerings, and then all the way down to like your grocery outlet and Winco's, where you can get groceries for a lot cheaper.
I've seen a lot of people say that Portland is kind of like an urban farming place.
Sure.
I've seen it a little bit. That might be exaggerated a little bit too. I mean, I saw somebody the other day that said that Portland is where the place where people have chickens in their yard, or maybe they said horses or something like that. And there's a lot of rural areas around Portland that are 20-30 minutes outside of like downtown Portland, like Portland proper, where people do sort of have urban farms. I haven't seen too much downtown, but definitely from the inner city to the surrounding suburbs, kind of that farming thing is definitely something that's like kind of like part of the Portland vibe.
Yeah, well, the last house that I sold, the sellers had 8 chickens in their backyard, and they were less than 10 minutes from downtown Portland. So
there you go.
Part of the deal was we had to help them find a home for these chickens, and we found a place like 30 minutes out of town, and all was good. But the other end of kind of the cost of food is dining out. On average, kind of the standard single meal, probably anywhere from $10 to $20, depending on where you're at and what you're getting.
We've got a menu right here.
Yeah.
We're at a restaurant here in the Portland metropolitan area. You can see some of these prices and what you're looking at here. This is a Mexican restaurant. So you can see right up at the top there, chips and salsa, guacamole. That guac's not cheap.
Guac's gonna get you.
It's never been cheap, but that'll give you kind of an idea of some prices for like a local restaurant. And this place is not. It's probably kind of middle of the road. It's a nice place. It's I wouldn't say it's super expensive though compared to other restaurants.
No, and Portland definitely has a very well-known culinary scene, but it's not really chock full of super stuffy, fancy, fine dining restaurants. But there are a lot of places where if you're getting like a 3-course meal, you're going to sit down. Say the average cost of that for a couple could be anywhere from $60 to $100. And obviously you can spend a lot more, but you're probably not spending less than $60 or $75.
Yeah. So I think you can kind of do it a little bit on the cheap by using farmers markets and stuff like that, but it can also be expensive too. We have just no limit to some of the best restaurants in the country here.
Yeah, I mean, some of the fanciest restaurants in Portland, 100, well, maybe not 100, but $70, $80, per person, maybe 100. And then those same restaurants might have a food cart in a food cart pod somewhere where you can get something for 10 or 12 bucks. So there's a really big range just depending on your lifestyle. You could spend a lot of money on food, but you don't have to necessarily living in the Portland area.
How about healthcare?
Healthcare, yeah.
Hospitals.
Portland is consistently ranked amongst the best, one of the best cities in the country for accessibility and affordability of healthcare. There's a ton of hospital systems and healthcare systems. There's Providence Health, Legacy Health, Kaiser Permanente. There's OHSU, which is also a research university, and I think one of the more prestigious medical research universities in the country.
What's OHSU stand for, so that people know?
It's Oregon Health and Science University. It's pretty much right downtown. I think the amount of healthcare systems available relative to the population is probably a ratio that's more in favor to, I guess the consumer in Portland than it is in some places around the country. So healthcare, because of that, because of the kind of abundance of it, tends to be a little more affordable than other places around the country.
Yeah, it is a little bit less than the rest of the country. Yeah, that's a good point. OHSU, and shout out to Dornbecker too. We have a great children's hospital here that's a part of OHSU. People come from all across the country to go to that hospital, and they actually took care of my family here recently with one of my kids too. So we have excellent healthcare here, and it's less than the national average. So that's a big plus, given that Portland in general is cost of living is higher than the national average.
Yeah, and so that's a lifestyle consideration, and a kind of a case-by-case thing. If you have medical issues, things that are kind of a recurring concern, where healthcare costs are going to be more of a consideration, definitely Portland being more affordable on the healthcare side is going to benefit you. Otherwise, it may not affect you, that much, kind of either way, regardless of where you're at. So.
Right. All right, next on the list, probably the biggest thing here.
What do we got?
Housing.
Housing.
Let's talk about houses.
Yeah.
I always like to talk about houses.
Why is that?
Well, we like, helping people buy and sell houses, and we love real estate too, so.
Oh, and I would say, by the way, if you are thinking about buying or selling a house, you got to talk to us, because, we want to give you as much information as possible with doing these videos, but, kind of the next step would be getting in touch with us, having a conversation about your lifestyle, what you're looking for, what brings you to the area, and we can kind of narrow down what neighborhoods are going to fit you best and just kind of start that house hunt.
Yeah. So housing, like the cost of living in Portland, is higher than the national average. It's significantly higher. It's maybe 40 or 50% higher. Right now, as it stands in early 2022, average home prices around Portland are like a 550, 560, something like that.
Up to 600. Kind of depends on where you look.
Going up day by day. But Portland is a big area, and you can actually. So if you're somebody that's maybe thinking about moving to Portland, or maybe you work in Portland and you're renting, and you're like $560,000, that's a little bit outside of my budget. You can find houses 20 or 30 minutes from like a downtown Portland, if that's where you're working. They're closer to like the 400 range. So there are quite a few different neighborhoods, and you can find some stuff cheaper, especially if you wanted to go. I mean, if you really don't mind a commute, if you want to go south, like towards a Woodburn, you can get into the 300s. That's probably not going to last too much longer.
Yeah. But
you can still find something that's pretty affordable as a starter home for most people, and still be close to Portland if that's where you want to be, for the amenities or because, for the work. A lot of people live in the suburbs, in the Portland metropolitan area, surrounding the area. And your home values are maybe going to be 5 or 10% less. So you're maybe looking like mid 400s to high 400s instead of like a mid 500s, closer to the 600s.
Yeah, so to put a little additional context around that, if the median sale price, at least right now, is somewhere around $575, give or take, if you're looking at kind of some of the more popular areas in and around Portland, what that's probably getting you is something that is 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, probably 3-bedroom, maybe 4-bedroom, but it's generally more or less going to be a starter home. That same budget in some more affordable areas around Portland, and even, like Seth said, 20, 25, 30 minutes from downtown Portland, you could get a 4-bedroom, 2,500 square foot house. So this is going to continue to go up. So what that exact number is, obviously that's going to be different depending on when you're watching this video. But there's definitely more affordable suburbs. Places like some parts of Beaverton, Hillsborough, Aloha, Sherwood, Wilsonville, even up in Vancouver, up in Washington, across the river. Some areas of West Lynn, tend to be a little more affordable than some parts of Portland proper.
You can go out east too, towards Troutdale.
Guys good?
Thank you. Yeah, we're doing good for now.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. go out east, and homes are, so the east side of Portland is kind of the older development. The west side's the newer development. You can go out pretty far east and find some fairly inexpensive homes too that way.
Yeah, a good rule of thumb, and there are some anomalies or kind of some one-offs here, but the further you go away from the city center, generally the more affordable housing is going to be.
Yeah.
So there's places like Lake Oswego, for example, and Dunthorpe, which are 6 or 7 miles from downtown, and some of the most expensive real estate, price per square foot in the state of Oregon. So there are some some exceptions, but generally
Yeah.
the further away you get from downtown, the more affordable housing is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of variation, and that's part of what we're here for, is to find you that perfect spot that's going to be near everything that you want to be close to, but fits right within your budget. All right, so what's next on the list?
What do we got?
Looks like utilities.
Utilities.
How's our utilities here?
Utilities are actually cheaper than the national average. So, if we're looking at Portland, being more expensive on average than the rest of the country, those utility costs come in actually below average, which is good news. There's probably a few different reasons for that. Our proximity to natural resources. We have Bonneville Dam about 40 miles from Portland.
Great place to tour too. Never been here.
Yeah, Columbia River Gorge out that way is beautiful. A lot of waterfalls.
Love the tours at the dam.
Yeah,
I remember I took that tour when I was a kid. I think that's every kind of elementary school tours.
I never made it out there. No.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's waterfalls and hikes around there too. But either way, just proximity to kind of the source of power probably has something to do with that. Another thing too is, and this might be a little harder to measure, but people in Portland, people in Oregon, probably people throughout the Northwest tend to be a little more kind of eco-conscious, eco-friendly. So they might be turning off the lights more often. They might be turning off the heat or the air conditioning more often when they're leaving their house for extended periods of time. Those things might factor in and might add up when it comes to those costs. It also doesn't get really that hot, and it also doesn't get that cold here. So you're not pumping air conditioning for 5 or 6 months out of the year. It can get really cold, and you're probably heating your house for at least 4 or 5 months out of the year. But your furnace, your gas, or if it's electric heater, you're not having to crank it up so high because you're battling with 10 degrees or 5 degrees outside for a couple months.
Right. Yeah. So that's a great point. So that's probably one of the main reasons why utilities here are a little bit less expensive. But all in all, a lot of people are concerned about internet too. We have some people that are working remotely, or they're concerned about the speed and the quality. Like, does your internet go out? The internet's pretty good here. We do have Comcast. I don't know that most people are fans of Comcast, but the speed and the reliability is typically pretty good. Now, I know there's probably going to be some Comcast people that are like, no, my internet goes out all the time, but for the most part, we've always had pretty good luck with our internet.
Yeah, CenturyLink services the area. There's some other smaller providers, so it's not a total monopoly, although most people probably, I would think, have Comcast, but it is it is the case now where there are more providers coming in, which can bring costs down too. And you're probably spending $60 to $100, maybe $120 a month, depending on how much internet you need. The speed, how many devices you're running, all of that.
Yeah, I pay $100 a month for my internet, but I have the fastest internet. Just because we need good upload speed and download speed, and the kids, on the tablets, and it's just a lot of devices in the house.
Yeah, these videos put a lot of stress on the upload. On the internet when you're uploading them.
Sometimes I'll be in the office uploading a video, and I'll hear one of my kids landing in the other room. Dad, the internet's slowing down or something like that. So
right.
that was when I had to upgrade the internet a couple years ago. But yeah, the internet here is pretty good. I would suggest too, if you haven't heard this before, Starlink. SpaceX, their company. If you've never heard about this, they offer an internet service that's relatively new, and it's satellite internet. The thing I like most about it, Comcast sucks you into these 2-year contracts that you can never get out of, and they always try and sneak in some extra fees, and they're always, it's a contract, but somehow the price goes up on you, you know, periodically, sometimes every month somehow, you know, with the extra fees and taxes. Starlink rather, a flat $100 a month, no contract. And from what I've heard, that the early people that have it, that this internet is great. It's really fast. I ordered it myself, but I'm not supposed to get it until late 2022. So that can be a solution for internet as well. Look into Starlink if you haven't heard that before.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion.
You might just have to wait for it a little while. All right, you know, next on the list, one thing we should talk about too is property taxes.
Sure.
Here in Oregon, we don't have sales tax, right? So that if you've never been to Oregon before, we're one of maybe a dozen states or so that doesn't have a sales tax. It's always nice to pay the price that you see for something, you know, when you buy something, rather than trying to have to, you know, calculate the tax. And but that you know. That is sort of made up for by in the property taxes. We do have some higher property taxes as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So property taxes are going to vary from the Portland area, which is basically made up, it's a tri-county area. It's made up of Multnomah County, which is like downtown Portland and the east side of Portland, and then Washington County, which is just southwest of Multnomah County, and then Clackamas County, which is more southeast of Multnomah County. Clackamas County, on average, pays lower taxes than Multnomah and Washington. Clackamas County is about 0.85%. Multnomah and Washington are just over 1%. And again, that's the county average. It will depend on the zone in your county, because it's going to be, there's quite a few different zones per county, but that's about the county average. Now, if you're somebody that's worried about property taxes because they are a little bit higher here, that's part of what we can help you with, is we can help you to understand what your property taxes are going to be, what's going to fit within your budget, and what you should expect.
Yeah, you can be, you know, in one neighborhood and move a mile away in any direction in the same county and be paying $1,000 more a year, $1,500 more a year, because it's a different tax zone or tax jurisdiction. So I think there's a lot of factors, a lot of things that play into that. Schools, public projects, parks, you know, roads, you know, things that are being built or developed or, you know, need renovation or work. So, you know, there's additional taxes levied in these different tax zones, and it's more or less seems to be taxed based on, you know, kind of who benefits. So, you know, the more you're benefiting from some of these public projects or services, you know, generally probably a little, you know, the more you're going to be paying in taxes, at least marginally. So
yeah, the taxes can be a little bit tricky. We do also have a law here. There's a couple different ways to factor in the taxes. I think the most common one is the assessed value. So there will be an assessed value of your property, and Oregon passed a law in the past that said that you can't raise the taxes more than 3% on the assessed value of the property. So you might have a property that's worth $800,000, but because it was built sometime in the past and you can't exceed that 3% rule, you might actually only be paying taxes on like $600,000 or just something really significantly less than the actual value of your home. So property taxes can be tricky, but again, that's part of what we're here for.
Yeah, I think once we're able to connect and start talking about neighborhoods, we can talk about what the property taxes look like in that particular neighborhood, and then when we find listings that you like, you know, we can actually look at the, you know, the prior year taxes for that property. So, you know, it's easy to access that information. It's public data. So it's just going to, you know, it's going to range quite a bit depending on where you're at.
Yeah. So all in all, if you're moving here from, like, say, a Midwest, your costs are going to be higher for a lot of things. Mostly the biggest thing, again, like we mentioned, groceries is probably going to be right about the same. Healthcare is going to be even less, and you might even get some better healthcare, better hospitals. But the big one, housing, is going to be higher. If you're looking at other places like San Francisco, Seattle, LA, or you're already in one of those places, had somebody from Seattle recently that said, hey, you know, we're in Seattle, but we like Portland too, and Portland is just a lot less money than Seattle. So if you're looking at the West Coast and comparing those towns, or if you're currently in one of those towns, you're going to find that Portland is going to be dramatically less. So it's really just going to depend on where you're coming from, what you're looking for. Again, that's part of what we're here, is to find you that perfect spot that's going to fit within your budget and meet all of your needs.
Yeah, one of the offsets for no sales tax is going to be the state income tax, which I believe does skew a little bit higher than the national average. It's not as high as California, and Washington actually doesn't have any state income tax, so
right.
You have a big range up and down the West Coast, but that's definitely something that factors in. The average salary in Portland, and the metro area is going to be around $70,000. So if you're getting an offer for a job and you're coming here to work and you're kind of calculating your expenses, budgeting for housing, and what you can afford and things like that, just know that, depending on what tax bracket you fall in, there's going to be a state income tax anywhere from 5 up to 9.9%.
Yeah, and pointing out that Washington doesn't have any state income tax, and the fact that somebody from Washington would rather live in Oregon due to cost, I mean, that should tell you a little bit about the cost of Seattle. But a little hack, too, that you occasionally see. Here in Portland, Oregon, we are right on the border of Washington, and so sometimes people will live in one place, work in another, and so sometimes people try and do a little hack as far as actually owning two homes and listing their primary residence as living in Washington, so they don't pay any state income tax when they're actually living in Oregon or somewhere in Portland. I know a few people that do that. Whether or not you're really supposed to do that's a different question.
This is not financial advice.
It's never financial advice. But that is a thing around here. People try and save by living in one place and working in another, again, being right there on that border. But all in all, your taxes in Oregon compared to if you're going to try and live in Seattle or anywhere else on the West Coast, you're probably going to be paying less here. Coming from somewhere else like the Midwest, probably going to be paying a little bit more. But like we said, there are pockets of Portland where you can be not too far away from Portland, and it's not $550,000, $600,000. You can get in maybe around $350,000, $400,000. Now that's changing fast. And if you've ever looked at a historical graph of home value growth throughout the entire country, there's not too many times in the past year, really only one, that you don't see growth. That was in 2008 when we had the crash, which was due to the mortgage industry. So
right.
Don't really expect growth to ever slow down, just a matter of how fast it's going to go. So those numbers are changing pretty fast. Hopefully they slow down a little bit. Probably be a little bit better for everybody if they slow down, quite frankly. But again, that's what we're here for, is to find you that perfect spot.
Yeah, and I think one of the bigger takeaways here should be that Portland is the most affordable city on the West Coast, most affordable major city on the West Coast. And the way I've always kind of looked at it is that Portland is starting to catch up with Seattle. Seattle's starting to catch up with like a San Francisco or LA when it comes to growing industries, job opportunities. Obviously, the more income, on average, the higher the housing costs are going to be. The more demand there is for a city to live in, the more demand there is going to be for housing. That's going to drive up prices. So, if you look at the trajectory, compared to other major cities on the West Coast, Portland is following that. And honestly, from more of kind of an investment perspective, for buying real estate here, if you look at what Seattle has done, if you look at where San Francisco is at in the Bay Area, you're really kind of getting in early, or kind of, at a lower level of whatever that ceiling, or plateau is going to be at some point someday, if that ever comes. So totally attainable. There's a ton of job opportunities here. The average household income and average individual salary is higher than the national average. So, and it's commensurate with the cost of living and the housing costs. So it's not like there's no job opportunities, but it's crazy expensive to live here.
Yeah.
There's a balance there. Whereas some places like, say, LA, San Francisco, even people who are making over $100,000 a year, might not be able to afford a decent apartment, in some places. So
yeah, and that's a great point to make. And from a perspective of investments, we work with people all across the country, and we do pay attention to the real estate market throughout a lot of the country. And San Francisco is one of the very few places in the country where I've actually seen months where they actually didn't see growth in their home values. So if you're considering this as part of an investment, San Francisco or even LA. Again, one of the very few places where you're probably not going to see the same type of appreciation. Portland has seen about the Portland proper area, like downtown Portland, east side of Portland, depending on what data you're looking at, has kind of grown 13 to 17%. We'll call it 15% over the past year. A lot of the surrounding suburbs in Washington County and Clackamas County have grown closer to 20%. Over the past year, and so some of the other places like in San Francisco aren't seeing that same growth, and in some cases they've seen a little bit of depreciation. So great point about investments too, because Portland is probably going to be one of your stronger investments if you're looking at other big cities on the West Coast.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just in the last year, but if you look historically, Portland's always been a bit of a blue-collar town, where there hadn't always been a tech industry. There hadn't always been, the apparel and hardware manufacturing and software, companies, that are here like there are today. That probably really picked up in the last 10 or 15 years. Obviously Nike's been here for a long time, Adidas, but home values have more than doubled in the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So if you look at the trajectory of either companies starting in the Portland area or coming to the Portland area, to have some offices, the job opportunities are growing like crazy, and that's reflected in the housing market.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that pretty much covers it. I think that's a pretty good description of what we're looking at as far as cost, whether you're coming from outside of the state or if you're just maybe currently renting or looking to move to a different part of Portland or somewhere else in Oregon. We work with people all across Oregon, so if you're thinking about buying or selling...
Well, you mentioned renting, and I just want to touch on that.
Sure, yeah.
Because... I don't know what it's like, in every city around the country, but home values have increased like crazy in the last, 12, 18, 24 months. Rent has actually grown at a larger rate.
That's right.
So it is, in some cases, much more affordable to buy than it is to rent a place. So if you're weighing your options and going back and forth, and even if you're moving here and thinking about renting first, even if you rented for 6 months, knowing that it's probably a little more expensive monthly, kind of in real time than buying a house, that's one thing, because there are benefits to being in a place, having flexibility, seeing what you like. But the rate that the housing market is growing, there's that also costs you whatever equity gains that you could potentially get if you were to buy right out of the gate. And if we're going along the same path, that could be $5,000, $15,000, $50,000, just depending on where and what. So, the whole renting versus buying thing, sometimes you have to, but it can be extremely costly if you decide to rent, and overall renting is more expensive across the board than buying.
Especially around here.
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with, like I said, we keep track of the real estate market throughout the country because of our clients, but really not familiar with rents throughout the country, but around Portland they are extremely expensive, and it's crazy what people are paying for rent. I think the average person, not even like in the expensive parts of Portland, but the average family looking at usually like $3,000 a month for rent, which if you look at like the average salary for a household of like 4 people or something like that, I'm not sure how people afford it. So with rent being that high, so it makes more sense than ever to buy if you can, and if you're not really sure if you can buy or not, there are a lot of programs that don't require too much money down or hardly any money down at all. You're always going to need a little bit of cash for things like closing costs, but there are different loan programs, like a USDA loan, for example, that requires almost nothing out of pocket for your down payment.
Yeah, and we're connected with a lot of lenders, that we could get you in touch with too. So, we're not necessarily, the best people to talk to about loan programs, but we are familiar with what they're, what's out there, and we can get you in touch with somebody who can give you a clear picture on what you can qualify for, how much you can afford, based on things like income and assets. And so, you just got to get in touch with us, and we can have that conversation.
Yeah, so if you're thinking, okay, Portland's, average homes are 550,000, 600,000. Let's just call it 500,000 for easy math. Usually don't like to do public math, but we'll give it a shot here anyways. If you're thinking I need 10% down or 20% down on $500,000, 20% of $500,000, that's 100K, 10% that's 50K, right? So if you're thinking I need at least $50,000 to buy a home in Portland, that might not be the case. You might be able to qualify for a different loan, FHA, USDA. If you're the military, obviously the VA loan is probably going to be your best bet. But there are a lot of different options that aren't necessarily going to require coming up with 50 or 100 grand to buy a house in Portland. Again, we know a lot about these things, but we're not experts. We do have a lot of experts that we work with, so we'll connect you to somebody if you do have questions about that.
Yep.
All right.
And if you are thinking about moving to the Portland area, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email. Again, click the link below in the description of this video, schedule a Zoom call. We can have a chat about what you're looking for, your timeline, get you on the right track.
Yeah, we always love to hear from people that watch our videos. It never gets old. However you want to get in touch with us, we've got your back when it comes to moving to Oregon.
And if we missed anything, leave it in the comments below. If there's anything you want to know about as far as affordability and what the costs look like, let us know. We'll give you an answer.
And if you're somebody that lives in the Portland area and you've experienced some crazy costs, whether they're high costs or low costs, leave us a comment, put a comment below, because other people like to see that as well and kind of get a feel for what other Portlanders and people that live around the Portland area are experiencing. If this video was helpful to you, give us a like. It helps the algorithm, helps our channel, it helps us know that we're doing a good job. We always appreciate that. And don't forget to subscribe. We do these videos about at least once a week. So when you subscribe, you're going to see more videos that are really going to give you a picture of what it's like to live in Portland and in Oregon.
And until next time, we'll check you later.
All right, everybody, take care.